Hey, welcome to Wolf's Watch. I'm Wolf, and today I want to talk to you about what not to do or how to alienate your customers during high inflation. Now, there was a lesson during the 1970s and early 80s when inflation was just insane. Same kind of thing that we're seeing right now. And it also changed radically in 2 to 3 year blocks. And it would be much higher, then it'd come back down a little bit. Everybody'd say, oh, it's getting better. And then boom, it'd skyrocket again. Interest rates are high. We're seeing interest climbing now. Fed is expected to continue that trend throughout the year, to say the least. Here's the point for today's brief talk. During the 70s, there were companies, particularly candy bars, is a great example. What they did as prices kept going up, they made the candy bars smaller, right? So you're getting less for the same amount. As inflation continued, you were getting less for more. And we saw that in other packaged products. The biggest example, the most impactful example was in packaged consumer goods like candy bars, cereals, other things you buy at the grocery store. We're already starting to see that with coffee. And I was looking, there was a sale on coffee. And I was shopping with the stealth wife, and we looked at the bag and we're going, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. And what was a pound was 12 ounces. Now, 12-ounce bags are of coffee, 12-ounce bags of coffee are common. What we noticed was there's a 2 to 4 ounce reduction in the size or in the weight of the coffee bags, even though it was marked on sale. And it's interesting too, because the sale prices were a discount off of an elevated price. So we're paying about the same as we would have several months ago for less coffee, marketed as big sale, big markdown. And that's what made me think about this, going, you need to not do that. Don't follow that example. What happened in the 70s and 80s when the economy turned back around, things started getting good again. Those customers didn't come back. Customers left. They were alienated by the companies that gave them less for the same and then less for more as their strategy, pricing strategy for responding to inflation. Took them longer to build back up to where they were after the economy calmed down and became really a strong boom economy, and competitors came in and took market share from them. So this is a couple opportunities for you. One, if you change your value stack, and I know this is nothing new, that if you've been following this series, if you've been with Wolf's Watch for any length of time, I have talked about this repeatedly. Focus on the value stack, right? You need to deliver more value to your customers as you're raising your prices in response to inflation. You can't just charge more than to adjust for inflated expenses on your part. Now you can. It'll alienate customers though, and guess what? Most of your competition is going to do that too. It gives you no competitive advantage. So competitive advantage to the value stack. Second is productivity. We talked about this on the last 2 episodes of Wolf's Watch. This is a third productivity tip. What you do with productivity is reduce your cost structure. Now, this is independent of your pricing policy, right? And while you're working on your pricing policy, you need to work on the cost structure. Here's an example. I used a manufacturing example on the last episode. Here is a non-manufacturing example that applies to all companies. What are you doing in your marketing and sales to use electronic tools to automate those processes to the greatest extent possible? There's a huge caveat with that. You can't automate something that doesn't work in the real world. The classic mistake with automating processes, especially going from a physical process to a digital process, is to just copy what you're already doing. Don't do that either. That will not help you with your cost structure. Okay. And it can be very dangerous, because if there are inherent inefficiencies and disconnects in the process, once you automate it, now you're generating problems and losses faster. Okay. What you need to do is make sure, working with your best people, what is the best practice that's getting the best result, and make sure that there's no disconnects in the process. And it sounds like a lot of work, not as much as you might think. It's pretty straightforward to do and can be done rapidly in order to make sure there's no big disconnects before moving into an electronic process. Then you continue to improve as you move forward. It's just you'll have a leg up on the competition because most of them will not implement that way. That's why 70% of those kinds of projects fail. Ken Blanchard Company has been bringing that to the business community's attention for years. And for the most part, most companies haven't changed. The high performers have. And that's where you want to stay, right? You want to be high performer. You want to stay high performer. Don't want to be part of the companies that are going to get hit hard as this inflationary cycle continues for at least the next 3 years, maybe as long as 5. Okay. So that's the second thing. Work on automate that process so that your people are focused more for sales, so that they're focused more on sales calls and closing business, so that your marketing is giving you a good ROI. And that's one of the metrics to be tracking. What is your marketing ROI in terms of how many dollars you're putting into marketing? How many dollars you're receiving back? What's that leverage factor? Because you should, you put $1 on the table for marketing, you should be getting multiple dollars back. Big companies, your big competitors, aren't tracking things that way. They're into PR, they're into presence, right? They want to be known, want to be top of mind. And you need to be top of mind. It's how do you do it? Right. So unless you've got millions or a billion, or even $1 billion laying around that you can spend on PR and recognition, so you can be seen. Right? You want to be seen on all the commercials on broadcast television. It's expensive. Don't do that. Stick with direct response marketing. I don't mean direct marketing, which is what multi-level marketing has evolved into as a phrase. Not knocking multi-level. If you're doing direct sales, it's a good business model. Just make sure you got a good business that you're working with. Enough on that topic. Coming back to what I mean by direct response marketing is you track those dollars. You put $1 in, that cues paying for actions to be taken, and you know what the result is. You know what the direct response is. Your customers, your prospective customers, get an opportunity to make a direct response to the marketing that you're putting out in the marketplace. Hugely important. So that's the second thing. So that's a way to automate and be more productive. So then your team can focus their time on the non-clerical, non-repetitive, non-creative tasks in order to continue to innovate. They can work both in and on the business. You can work both in and on the business. So that's the second. And the third part of this is as you are doing this automation, as you're working on the value stack, going to come back to pricing policy because this interplays with the marketing. And this is part of a previous episode, talked about the mindset that you need to lead, the psychology change that you need to lead in your team, your company, is cash up front, secure your cash, right? The 3 biggies are secure your cash, cut expenses through productivity, make big, intelligent, strategic CapEx, capital expenditures, even though it's a time of inflation. Build out strategically. There's a huge, I have a case study that we'll talk about in a future episode on that. So come back to this third thing in your pricing policy, make sure that everyone is focused in your sales team on not doing long-term contracts. Be very, very careful of that, because in an inflationary cycle, you have a problem with, if you lock it in today and you let that run out for 2 years, it's a long-term contract. I've worked on aircraft development and delivery, development, production, and delivery. That can take 3 to 4 years just to get parts in-house to build one. And so that's something that can run a decade on a delivery contract, those kind of long-term contracts. In your case, you may not be dealing with those timeframes, but think about what happens to the time value of money in a 6 to 24 month period of time when inflation is, now we're up to, last month was 7.4%. And then they adjust. So they said, no, it wasn't that bad. Now they're saying it's 8.5%. It was 7.4%. Now it's up to 8.5%. If that continues to go up, you can be in a position where the dollars that you have committed to today are worth 20% less in terms of buying power to pay your expenses when those dollars come in from the customer, right? So you got to be careful about that. Be very, very purposeful in long-term contracts. Don't do it phase it. Phase it as an option. Here's the best practice for you. Go shorter term contracts with options to move forward, and very well crafted clauses that protect you and your customer, right? And this comes back to something that we're going to be talking about tomorrow with our special guest, Doug Wing. He is the former vice chairman of the Little Giant Ladder Company, and his father founded and built that company. And something that his father, Hal Wing, was famous for saying is, if it's not a good deal for everyone around the table, it's not a good deal. That applies to these clauses in that you need to do in high inflation for working with customers over the long term, right? You need to have well-written clauses to protect you and your customer, because prices are spiraling right now. We don't know how far it's going to go. Bank of America released its second hyperinflation warning. It released one last summer when a lot of the so-called experts were still saying, inflation is just going to be transitory. Don't worry about it. Nothing to see here. So Deutsche Bank has released a warning as well on things that are happening with inflation and how it's affecting the money markets. Watch that. Don't get locked into something that could eventually do you harm and do your customer harm, because you're delivering value to your customer, right? You are helping your customer. If they don't get what you have, it's bad for them. So we need to maintain that relationship, and the same with your suppliers. There's a tendency to want to do short-term cash with customers, long-term payments with suppliers. Be careful on that too. You're all in this together in your supply chain. So you need to work something that's well crafted with them that gives you and your suppliers safety valves so that you can both stay in business. And that's the 3 big tips for today. Tomorrow, we are going to have a wonderful conversation with our guest. If I succeed in bringing this up. There he is, Doug Wing. Was vice chairman of Little Giant Ladder Company. He's now semi-retired from that and moved on to other projects and doing a lot of great work in the business community. Fun guy, just a great gentleman. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I didn't get to know his dad, but I can see the echo in the gentleman and the adventure streak that Doug has. And he's also a very smart businessman. So we'll be talking more about, things like how it's not a good deal if it's not a good deal for everyone around the table. Doug, how you doing, my friend? See, there he is. Doug, glad you're part of the conversation. Looking forward to talking with you tomorrow. And we're just wrapping up. I'm so glad Doug stopped in. It is going to be an awesome conversation. And there's other interviews with Doug that you can find. I've shared them out to my social media sites because he has a best-selling book, Giant Success, which has him on the speaking circuit. Because when you get a bestseller, you got to get the information out. And he's been on a lot of interviews doing that. I highly recommend watching those as well. And, get some questions together. Join us tomorrow. It will be at 10 a.m. Pacific time on our next episode, which will be Friday, April 15th. Doug, thanks for joining us. It was just closing up, and I'm going to look forward to having you part of the conversation. And so as you're watching this, it's going to be live Q&A with Doug, right? This is 21st Century Television, live and interactive. So please join us for that. And I'm Wolf. This is Wolf's Watch, and I will see you on the trail.